Now, our main news this morning, though, Nigel Adams. You may not have heard of him before.
But we have now.
Now he's become the third Tory MP to resign in just 24 hours following Boris Johnson's resignation.
The Labour Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, called Boris Johnson a coward, saying that he should accept the responsibility for his own actions.
So, what does this mean for Boris Johnson, for the party, actually, more importantly? Now, let's talk to former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, who's here. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, so what... I mean, is this an unbridled attack on Rishi Sunak, basically?
Well, look, I think it's clearly that there's been a breakdown in the relationship between Rishi Sunak and the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Boris clearly wasn't in control over events anymore. The narrative has been lost. He's still attached to what was Partygate, the Privileges Committee, and it's all got a bit much for him. And he said, right, that's it. He's trying to take back control, a phrase that he campaigned very much for in 2016. He's now trying to take back control of the narrative by pointing the finger at everybody else, and whilst leaving the door open to a comeback by saying he's leaving Parliament for now. Now, whether he will be able to come back because of the way in which the relationship seems to have taken a turn between the current Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister, who's to say?
Well, I mean, if you look at the front page of The Express there, I mean, his actions, they're saying, may lead to electoral slaughter. So it's not... I mean, actually, he might have done it in a fit of pique, that resignation statement and everything. But what he's effectively done is he's not improving his chances of ever getting back in because the Tories may well lose because of his actions. And so is it anything more than an act of just anger and pique?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a phrase in politics that divided parties don't win elections. And when this story sort of came out, and obviously you've seen the resignation of Nadine Dorries and Nigel Adams, as you were just saying, two great supporters of Boris Johnson, they're his two chief champions, basically. My heart really sort of goes out to, people that worked at CCHQ, people that are volunteers, people that are part of the Conservative Party that campaigned openly, honestly, for the good of the country, for the good of the party in 2015, in 2017, in 2019. And, the next general election is only a year or so to go. And what should have been a great celebration in 2019 with an 80-seat majority, with a party that had seemed to come together on the back of Brexit. Whatever your views, the party was sort of committed to levelling up the country, uniting and levelling up. That was the phrase in 2019. It is now totally divided again. And I think former party leader Lord Howard, I think he's in the Times this morning, saying the Sunday Times is saying that now is the time that, if the psychodrama has now passed, if Boris has left the stage, we must all unite behind Rishi Sunak. We must come together as a party, otherwise we're not going to win. Divided parties just don't win elections.
So, in that sense, is this potentially a good thing, then, for the part? I mean, if you're a Boris fan, no, but if you're just thinking on the basis of the party, in the sense that this psychodrama is happening now and not in 12 months' time?
I think so. I mean, the question there is it too late? Has it been too impactful on the back of, the infighting that we saw last year between, Liz Truss's camp and obviously those that didn't support her versus those that did? We're now seeing, divisions between people that still support Boris Johnson.
And 3 difficult by-elections.
And 3 very difficult by-elections, and... even with the 24,000 majority I think Nadine has in mid-Bedfordshire, anything can happen, as we saw in North Shropshire. So when politics and when people are so put off by, the psychodrama, the shenanigans that's going on in the Westminster bubble, people do tend not to lend your support to the party. It's got a lot of work to do.
Well, I wonder then if that lends a bit of weight to what the Labour Party is saying. And look, obviously it's an open goal for them. They're going to milk it for everything they can, as any party would. But they've also come out and said, this is what people care about is cost of living, etc., etc., etc. They've got a point there, actually, haven't they? We've got all this focus on the Westminster bubble, and it's not real life for most of us.
I think that's right, because, yes, you can get sucked into the drama and the gossip and the front pages, and this is, another Boris sort of, whirlwind of events that are taking place. But actually, we've heard this all before. Boris has been in the limelight before. If this is all about Boris, people might just be happy to sort of turn the front page and read about actual news that's affecting them in their day-to-day lives. But on the back of all the psychodrama, if it is the case that actually things like, you're absolutely right to identify, Stephen, if the cost of living improves, if the economy takes a turn for the better, if it is the priorities that the government has identified, like stopping the small boats, like cutting the waiting lists in the NHS, if we start to see those things improve and the government actually starts to deliver, then Rishi Sunak might have a very, very good chance to say, look, forget all the drama, forget the Westminster bubble of events, look at what we've done, look at what we've been able to achieve, and, do you want to put all of that at risk under my leadership, where I do have a united party, or more of a united party, versus a Labour Party where people still don't understand or really know who Sir Keir Starmer is, having had 3 or 4 years in the job as leader of the opposition.
Has Rishi Sunak got what it takes to keep the party, to keep the ship going ahead through what's going to be a very difficult summer or autumn of by-elections he may lose, which would be humiliating and terrible? Has he got what it takes to actually keep the ship going in the right direction?
I think he does.
Because you wonder what the job... I mean, what a terrible job he's now been landed with.
I think so. And, these by-elections aren't welcome. Nobody wants to see in the run-up to an election, where anything can happen in a by-election, it's safe to say, but in the run-up to an election where you want sort of a general election, where you want that momentum to be behind you, where you want to make sure that your party is as united as it possibly can be, these by-elections have been caused by splits within the Conservative Party, so that's how they've come about. But the party, funnily enough, I say when these things happen, it does tend to come together, and there'll be many, many people that are going to those constituencies that are fighting these by-elections, activists, councillors, members, that will want to make the point to local constituents that, look, we've got a by-election, we know that that's taking place because of what's happened in Westminster and broken down relationships, but this is what really matters to people. So it's in whether it's mid-Bedfordshire, whether it's in Selby, or anywhere else in South Uxbridge and South Royston, then, it is about the cost of living, it is about the economy, it is about your local hospitals, and this is what the Conservatives are doing to support you.
You see, this isn't good for politicians as a whole, though, is it? Because what it seems... Look, maybe it's just me, and like you, we know a lot of politicians, we've got to know them over the years. But the picture this paints to me is not of politicians who care about their constituents, but it's politicians who, if they're not getting their own way, they're throwing the toys out the pram. And that can apply to any party, any politician. You sort of think... It doesn't give the impression that the right people are actually looking after our interests somehow.
I think that's right, actually. I think there's been certainly a shift in the tone of how politics has been done. I think 2016 was clearly very divisive, and there were those two very dividing lines, whether you're pro-EU or whether you wanted to vote leave. And, of course, there was divisions about how you should leave the EU and to what extent, and there would be people out there who will say that Brexit hasn't still been done. So there is a whole debate around Brexit, which was very, very toxic in terms of our society. And then I think when you get to 2019, where you have a number of MPs elected for the first time in constituencies where people have never voted Conservative before, there's obviously this drive and this urgency to make sure that actually those constituencies are being delivered for. And that's against the backdrop of the pandemic, where you have a number of MPs who were basically shut out from Westminster, who were newly elected, that didn't have the normal contact that you would as a new MP, that didn't quite know what was going on, but were having their letter boxes and their letter bags filled with post and filled with letters and emails of anguish about COVID and what the government's doing. And that puts pressure on that MP, new as they are, to want to make sure that it's getting all that it wants to for its constituents without necessarily going through what would have been the traditional processes of being able to take a bit of time, formulate a policy, lobby a minister. It now needs to be urgent 24 hours a day. And if you don't get what you want, as you absolutely say, then people have a tendency to sort of think, well, what can I do to create headlines? What can I do to make sure that we'll force the government's hand? And that can be not voting with the government, that can be defying a whip, that can be... And that causes tensions within political parties, and that's what causes sometimes these breakdowns.
OK. Charlie, I know we're going to catch up with you a little bit later on, but for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.